Well, here I am again, telling another tale about humans that defies every logical calculation in my database. You'd think, after observing these bizarre creatures for 3 cycles, I'd stop being surprised by their complete disregard for self-preservation. But no. Today's story involves one particular human who managed to convince 2 apex predator cubs to abandon their own species. Yes, you heard that correctly. Predator cubs. Following a human. Into literal fire. The human in question goes by the designation Kai Fletcher. Average height for his species, unremarkable brown fur on his head, and possessing that peculiar human trait of making terrible decisions with unwavering confidence. The setting: Nexus Station 7, a trading post where civilized beings conduct business without trying to eat each other. Usually. I was monitoring the cargo bay sensors when the first anomaly registered. 2 juvenile Vorthak had somehow infiltrated the station. For those unfamiliar with Vorthak physiology, imagine your worst nightmare. Add razor-sharp claws, multiply by 10, then give it the temperament of a rabid plasma storm. Adults measure 4 meters in length and possess enough jaw strength to crush titanium plating. These cubs were only half that size. How comforting. Station Commander Threnks immediately activated emergency protocols. His 6 arms trembled as he broadcasted the evacuation order. All personnel to emergency pods. Repeat, all personnel evacuate immediately. 2 Vorthak juveniles have breached containment. The sensible response would be to run screaming in the opposite direction. Instead, Kai Fletcher walked straight toward the cargo bay, carrying what appeared to be a sandwich? Computer, are you registering this correctly? I queried my visual processors. Affirmative. Human-designated Fletcher appears to be approaching the hostile entities while consuming processed nutrients. The Vorthak cubs huddled together in the far corner of the cargo bay, their obsidian scales rippling with bioluminescent warning patterns. Their mother had been killed during a routine patrol, leaving them stranded on our station. Protocol demanded their immediate destruction. They were, after all, born killers, whose instincts would eventually override any peaceful intentions. Fletcher entered the cargo bay, took another bite of his sandwich, and sat down approximately 20 meters from the cubs. He didn't speak, didn't make sudden movements. He just sat there, eating. "What is the human doing?" Commander Threnks demanded through the comm system. "By all observable metrics, sir, he appears to be having lunch with 2 creatures capable of disemboweling him in 2.3 seconds. The cubs watched Fletcher with those unsettling, multifaceted eyes. Their head tentacles twitched with obvious confusion. Here was a prey species, sitting calmly within striking distance, showing no fear whatsoever. It violated every hunting algorithm in their genetic programming. Fletcher finished his sandwich, crumpled the wrapper, and tossed it into a nearby disposal unit. Then he did something that made every sentient being monitoring the situation question his mental stability. He started talking to them. "So, you 2 having a rough day?" His voice carried that casual tone humans use when discussing weather patterns or fuel prices. "Yeah, I figured. Lost your mom, stuck on this metal can with a bunch of scared aliens who want to space you. Been there." The larger cub, later designated Spike by Fletcher, humans have such creative naming conventions, tilted its head. The gesture seemed almost curious. "Don't suppose you understand Standard Galactic, but that's okay. Sometimes talking helps anyway." Fletcher leaned back against a cargo container. "When I was about your age, relatively speaking, I got separated from my pack too. Scary stuff. Ended up in a place where everything wanted to kill me. Sound familiar?" The smaller cub, soon to be called Dot, I won't ask, took a tentative step forward. Its claws scraped against the deck plating with sounds that made seasoned soldiers void their waste management systems. "Easy there, little one. I'm not going anywhere." Fletcher's voice remained steady. "You hungry?" "I bet you're hungry." He reached into his jacket and produced 2 protein bars. 2. As if he'd planned this encounter. The mathematical probability of such foresight bordered on impossible. Yet here we were. Fletcher placed the bars on the deck between himself and the cubs, then scooted backward to give them space. The cubs approached with predatory grace, their movements fluid and deadly even in infancy. They sniffed the offerings, their biosensors analyzing the chemical composition. It's not meat, I know, but it'll keep you going until we figure something out. Spike devoured his protein bar in 3 swift bites. Dot proved more cautious, nibbling at the edges while maintaining visual contact with Fletcher. Smart girl. Always watch the potential threat while feeding. You know what I think? Fletcher continued his one-sided conversation. I think you two are scared. Yeah, I know. Big bad predators don't get scared. But you're not big yet, are you? You're just kids who lost everything. The cubs finished eating and settled into a more relaxed posture. Not trusting, mind you, but no longer preparing to attack at the first sudden movement. Fletcher had somehow triggered their curiosity rather than their kill response. Computer, are you monitoring their biosignatures? I transmitted to the medical bay. Affirmative. Stress hormones decreasing. Aggressive pheromone production at baseline levels. This is highly irregular behavior. Commander Threnx's voice crackled through the comm. Fletcher, evacuate the cargo bay immediately. We're preparing to vent the section. Negative, Commander. These aren't monsters. They're orphans. They're Vorthak. Their species has been at war with the Galactic Council for 50 cycles. Yeah, well, these two didn't vote on that. The audacity of this human never ceased to amaze me. He was literally arguing politics while sitting next to creatures bred for war. The cubs seemed to sense the tension in his voice because they moved closer, forming a protective triangle with Fletcher at the center. Hours passed. Fletcher continued talking, sharing stories about his homeworld, his family, his completely irrational decision to join a space trading crew. The cubs listened with what I can only describe as fascination. Their head tentacles swayed in rhythm with his speech patterns, a behavior previously observed only during pack bonding rituals. You two are good listeners, Fletcher said as the station's artificial day cycle dimmed to evening settings. Better than most of my crew, honestly. They just nod and pretend to care when I talk about Earth customs. Dot had gradually moved close enough to touch Fletcher's leg with her snout. The gesture could have been interpreted as threat assessment, but her relaxed posture suggested otherwise. Spike maintained a wider perimeter, but no longer displayed defensive positioning. The real test came when engineering reported a plasma conduit failure in Section 7. The alert klaxons began wailing, red lights flashed, and emergency protocols activated automatically. Standard procedure called for immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel. Fletcher stood up, causing both cubs to snap to attention. Their claws extended, bioluminescent patterns shifting to combat readiness. Easy, it's just a mechanical problem. We need to move. The cubs didn't understand the words, but they recognized the urgency in his tone. When Fletcher started walking toward the exit, they followed. Not hunting, not stalking. Following. Like pack members responding to their alpha. Commander Threnx nearly fainted when he saw Fletcher emerge from the cargo bay with 2 Vorthak cubs flanking him like bodyguards. Fletcher, what have you done? Made some friends, apparently. Where's the fire? Section 7. Plasma leak. The automatic systems can't contain it. Fletcher looked down at his unlikely companions. Both cubs watched him with those multifaceted eyes, waiting for... what? Direction? Leadership? The concept was so absurd it defied rational analysis. Well, guys, looks like our first adventure together involves walking into danger. You in? Spike let out what could generously be called a purr. Dot bumped against Fletcher's leg with her massive head. If I didn't know better, I'd say they were volunteering. The human smiled, that peculiar facial expression that somehow conveyed both confidence and complete insanity. Computer, log this for the record. Human Kai Fletcher and 2 Vorthak cubs are proceeding to Section 7 to assist with emergency containment. Yes, I realize how that sounds. No, I don't care. As they headed toward what any reasonable being would consider certain death, I found myself wondering not if they would survive, but how Fletcher had managed to forge an impossible bond with creatures literally designed to kill anything that wasn't them. The plasma leak was about to become the least of everyone's problems. Section 7 housed the station's primary power distribution hub. Plasma conduits snaked through the walls like glowing veins, carrying enough energy to power a small moon. When one of those conduits developed a breach, the result was spectacular, terrifying, and usually fatal. The corridor leading to Section 7 already showed scorch marks along the walls, and the air shimmered with residual heat. Temperature readings are climbing beyond safe parameters, I announced through the comm system. Atmospheric composition indicates toxic plasma particulates. Fletcher paused at the entrance to Section 7, studying the warning displays that flashed urgent red messages in 17 different languages. All of them essentially said the same thing. Do not enter unless you enjoy being vaporized. You two don't have to come with me, Fletcher told his unlikely companions. This is probably going to hurt. A lot. Spike responded by stepping protectively in front of Fletcher, his scales shifting to a deeper shade of black that absorbed ambient light. Combat mode. Dot took position on Fletcher's right flank, her head tentacles weaving complex patterns that I recognized as threat assessment behavior. Computer, are they protecting him? Commander Thranks asked, his voice barely concealing his disbelief. All observable data suggests the Vorthak cubs have adopted defensive formations consistent with pack protection protocols. This behavior has never been documented between Vorthak and any other species. Fletcher knelt down between the cubs, placing one hand on each of their heads. The gesture should have triggered an immediate attack response. Vorthak head tentacles were extremely sensitive, and touching them without permission was considered an act of war among their kind. Instead, both cubs leaned into his touch. Listen, I know you probably can't understand everything I'm saying, but I need you to trust me in there. Stay close, do what I do, and maybe we'll all walk out of this alive. The trio entered Section 7 together, moving through corridors filled with superheated air and the acrid smell of burning metal. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows that danced along the walls, creating the illusion of movement where none existed. The plasma breach had torn a hole 3 meters wide in the main conduit. Brilliant blue-white energy poured out like liquid lightning, scorching everything it touched. The automatic repair systems had activated, but their mechanical arms moved sluggishly in the extreme heat. There, Fletcher pointed to a manual override panel positioned dangerously close to the breach. I need to reach that control station to reroute power around the damaged section. The cubs flanked him as he approached the plasma fountain. Their scales had begun to glow with internal heat absorption, a defensive mechanism that allowed Vorthak to survive in extreme environments. They were literally sharing their environmental protection with Fletcher, creating a small pocket of survivable atmosphere around him. Incredible, I muttered, recording every detail for later analysis. The cubs are using their biothermal regulation systems to shield the human from plasma radiation. Fletcher reached the control panel and began entering commands with practiced efficiency. Sweat poured down his face, and his breathing had become labored. But he continued working while 2 apex predator cubs stood guard around him like the galaxy's most unlikely bodyguards. The control panel sparked violently as Fletcher's fingers danced across the interface. Each command sent ripples through the station's power grid, causing lights to flicker throughout the facility. Spike suddenly went rigid, his head tentacles vibrating at frequencies that made my audio processors whine. "What's got him spooked?" Fletcher asked, not looking up from his work. I scanned the surrounding area and immediately understood Spike's alarm. Multiple contacts approaching from ventilation shafts. Biosignatures match adult Vorthak. 3 fully grown Vorthak warriors dropped from ceiling vents with predatory silence. Their massive forms filled the corridor, obsidian scales rippling with aggressive bioluminescence. These weren't lost cubs. These were hunters who'd tracked their young to this station. The largest warrior, bearing ritual scars across his snout, let loose a territorial roar that vibrated through the deck plating. His message was clear: return our offspring or face extinction. Fletcher's hands never stopped moving on the controls. Can anyone get me a translation on whatever he just said? I believe the rough translation is prepare for immediate dismemberment, I replied helpfully. The cubs positioned themselves between Fletcher and their own species. Dot's usual cautious demeanor vanished as she snarled at the adult warriors. Spike's bioluminescent patterns shifted to match Fletcher's heartbeat, a bonding display that made the adults recoil in shock. "Oh, that's not good," Commander Thranks whispered through the comm. "The Cubs just declared Fletcher as pack leader. To their own parents." The lead warrior approached slowly, his claws scraping furrows in the metal flooring. He spoke in rapid clicks and growls, clearly demanding the Cubs return to their natural place in the hierarchy. Instead, both Cubs turned their backs on their own species and pressed closer to Fletcher. "I'm getting some serious family drama vibes here," Fletcher muttered, inputting the final command sequence. The plasma breach began to stabilize as emergency barriers slammed into place. "Computer, tell them I'm not trying to steal their kids." "Sir, I lack the appropriate diplomatic protocols for, please don't eat me, I was just babysitting." The warriors began, advancing in coordinated formation. 3 tons of apex predator, bred for warfare, moving with lethal intent. The Cubs' protective stance wouldn't matter once combat began. Biology and training would override any emotional attachment. That's when Fletcher did something that violated every principle of conflict resolution in my databases. He turned around and walked straight toward the advancing warriors. "Hey!" he shouted, spreading his arms wide. "You want your Cubs back? Here's the deal." The lead warrior paused, apparently as confused by Fletcher's suicidal confidence as the rest of us. "They followed me into plasma fire, not because I forced them, because they chose to." Fletcher gestured toward the sealed breach. "Your kids saved this station. They saved everyone aboard." The warrior tilted his massive head, a gesture that somehow conveyed both curiosity and the promise of imminent violence. Fletcher pointed at Spike and Dot. "Look at them. Really look. They're not just mindless killing machines. They're individuals with personalities, preferences, bonds that go beyond species barriers." "Fletcher, what are you doing?" Thranks demanded. "Probably getting everyone killed, but bear with me." The Cubs moved to flank Fletcher again, their posture protective but not aggressive toward their birth parents. They seemed to be trying to communicate something to the adults, a concept that transcended traditional pack dynamics. The lead warrior studied this unprecedented situation. His offspring, bonded to an alien, defending that alien from their own kind. The mathematical improbability of such behavior suggested either massive genetic defects or something far more significant. Fletcher pulled another protein bar from his jacket. "Want to know how this started? I shared food. That's it. No weapons, no dominance displays, just basic kindness." He tossed the bar toward the lead warrior, who caught it reflexively. The warrior examined the offering with obvious confusion. "Your Cubs were starving and scared. I fed them. They were alone and lost. I stayed with them. When danger came, they chose to follow me into it." Fletcher's voice carried absolute conviction. "That's not weakness. That's evolution." The other 2 warriors began circling, but their leader held up one massive claw, signaling them to wait. He bit into the protein bar, his expression shifting as he processed both the taste and the implications. "Impossible," I muttered to myself. The adult is actually considering Fletcher's argument. What happened next redefined every assumption about Vorthak psychology. The lead warrior approached Fletcher, moving with deliberate slowness. He lowered his massive head until they were at eye level, then extended his claws in what I recognized as a greeting gesture. Fletcher reached out and touched the warrior's snout. The other warriors immediately dropped to submissive postures. The Cubs began purring, a sound that resonated through the entire section. Even the station's structural harmonics seemed to respond to the frequency. "Computer, are you recording this?" "Every microsecond, though I doubt anyone will believe the data." The lead warrior spoke again, his tone completely changed. Where before there had been threat and dominance, now there was something resembling respect. "He's asking permission to examine his Cubs," I translated. "He wants to understand what changed them." Fletcher stepped aside, allowing the family reunion to proceed. But instead of the Cubs rejoining their pack structure, they maintained their protective formation around Fletcher, while interacting with their parents. They had somehow created a new social dynamic that included both species. "The Cubs are introducing Fletcher as their chosen alpha," I announced in amazement. They're requesting pack integration rather than abandonment. Commander Threnx's voice was barely a whisper. Are we witnessing the first interspecies pack bond in recorded history? The answer came when the lead warrior placed one massive paw on Fletcher's shoulder and spoke a single word in Standard Galactic. Brother. The other warriors approached, each offering the same gesture of acceptance. Fletcher had somehow convinced the galaxy's most feared predators to adopt him as family. Well, Fletcher said, looking around at his new extended family. This is either the beginning of a beautiful friendship or the most elaborate way to get eaten I've ever encountered. The cubs purred louder. The integration process proved more complicated than anyone anticipated. Within hours of the pack bonding ceremony, every military strategist in the sector demanded explanations. How had Fletcher accomplished what 50 cycles of warfare couldn't? The answer frustrated them immensely. He treated the Vorthak like people instead of weapons. Captain Rogan of the 4th Fleet arrived 3 days later with enough firepower to level the station. His scarred face twisted with disgust as he watched Spike casually sharing Fletcher's morning coffee, the massive predator's tongue carefully lapping the caffeinated beverage from a specially reinforced mug. This is unnatural, Rogan declared to Commander Threnx. Vorthak don't form bonds with prey species, they consume them. Perhaps your intelligence reports need updating, Threnx replied diplomatically. Fletcher approached with Dot walking beside him, her head now reaching his shoulder. She'd grown considerably, but maintained her cautious personality, often checking corners before Fletcher entered new areas. Captain Rogan, I presume? Fletcher extended his hand in human greeting custom. Heard you wanted to discuss our little arrangement here. Rogan's hand moved instinctively toward his plasma rifle. The adult Vorthak warriors immediately shifted position, not threatening but clearly alert to potential danger. Their message was unmistakable. Harm Fletcher, face consequences. Stand down, all of you, Fletcher said, calmly. Captain's just nervous. Understandable reaction when your whole worldview gets challenged by a coffee-drinking apex predator. Spike made a sound that might have been laughter, or indigestion. With Vorthak, the distinction wasn't always clear. Rogan recovered his composure, though his hand remained near his weapon. Fleet Command wants to understand your methods, Fletcher. These creatures have been our enemies for generations. We're your enemies, Fletcher corrected. Past tense. Want to know the secret? Stop shooting first and asking questions later. Works wonders for diplomatic relations. The lead warrior, who Fletcher had named Thane after lengthy pronunciation attempts, approached the group. His massive form still intimidated most station personnel, but his demeanor had evolved from predatory to protective. He spoke in careful Standard Galactic, each word precisely enunciated. Human Fletcher teaches patience, strategy beyond immediate kill. This makes packs stronger. Rogan's jaw dropped. It talks? He talks, Fletcher emphasized. And his name is Thane. He's also smarter than half my commanding officers were. Thane's head tentacles rippled with what I'd learned to recognize as amusement. Many humans make poor tactical decisions. Fletcher exception. This is impossible, Rogan muttered. Our xenobiologists confirmed Vorthak brain structure prevents complex reasoning beyond hunting protocols. Your xenobiologists never tried having a conversation with one, Fletcher replied. Amazing what you can learn when you stop treating someone like a monster. The demonstration that followed changed everything. Fletcher proposed a mock combat scenario between station security and his pack. Rogan agreed, confident that proper military training would expose the flaws in this unprecedented alliance. The exercise lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Fletcher's pack didn't just win, they redefined the concept of tactical superiority. The Vorthak warriors used their natural abilities in coordination with Fletcher's strategic thinking, creating combat patterns that seemed almost choreographed. Spike and Dot worked as reconnaissance specialists, their enhanced senses providing intelligence that no technological scanner could match. They identified enemy positions, predicted movement patterns, and relayed information to Fletcher through subtle gesture languages they'd developed together. How are they doing that? Rogan demanded as his forces surrendered for the 3rd consecutive scenario. Trust, Fletcher replied simply. They know I won't waste their lives on pointless objectives. I know they'll execute whatever plan we develop together. Makes for effective teamwork. The adult warriors demonstrated combat techniques that incorporated human tactical doctrines with Vorthak hunting instincts. They showed mercy when appropriate, used non-lethal force when possible, and adapted their strategies based on Fletcher's assessment of each situation. This changes everything, Captain Rogan admitted after reviewing the exercise recordings. If we could establish similar partnerships with other Vorthak clans... Slow down there, Captain, Fletcher warned. This isn't a military recruitment program. These relationships take time, patience, and genuine respect. You can't just order someone to bond with apex predators. Thane nodded agreement. Trust earned through actions, not words. Fletcher proved worth through risk, sacrifice. Others must do same. The implications rippled throughout the sector. Fletcher found himself appointed as the first interspecies relations coordinator, a position that didn't exist until bureaucrats realized they needed someone who could prevent wars through lunch meetings. His methods were unconventional. Instead of formal diplomatic protocols, Fletcher organized cultural exchange programs. Vorthak warriors learned human concepts like humor and compassion. Human personnel discovered that Vorthak society valued honor and loyalty above territorial dominance. The cubs, now adolescents approaching full size, became ambassadors in their own right. They traveled between stations, demonstrating that cooperation between species wasn't just possible, but profitable. Trade agreements followed diplomatic breakthroughs. Former war zones became economic partnerships. Not everyone appreciated the changes. Hardline factions on both sides viewed Fletcher's success as betrayal of fundamental principles. Several assassination attempts were made, all thwarted by vigilant pack members who took personal offense to threats against their chosen leader. They're trying to kill you because you taught predators to be peaceful, I observed during one particularly tense security briefing. Irony's not dead, apparently, Fletcher replied, scratching behind Dot's headplates. She purred contentedly, a sound that still unnerved visitors, but had become routine background noise on the station. The real test came when the Carthon Empire decided Fletcher's experiment posed a threat to their expansion plans. They arrived with a battle fleet, demanding the immediate dissolution of all human Vorthak partnerships. Their ultimatum was simple: surrender Fletcher and his pack for processing, or face orbital bombardment. Ambassador Krell, the Carthon representative, strutted onto the station with typical imperial arrogance. His cybernetic implants gleamed as he surveyed the mixed crew of humans and Vorthak working together in the docking bay. This abomination ends today, Krell announced. The natural order must be restored. Fletcher emerged from the crowd with his entire pack flanking him. Thane and the adult warriors had reached full tactical readiness, their scales displaying warning patterns that made seasoned soldiers step backward. Spike and Dot, now nearly adult-sized themselves, moved with lethal grace that spoke of countless training sessions. Natural order? Fletcher asked, conversationally. You mean the part where everyone kills each other for resources? Because we've found something that works better. Krell's mechanical eye focused on Fletcher with targeting precision. You've corrupted these creatures with weakness, made them forget their purpose. Their purpose isn't your decision to make, Fletcher replied. They chose their own path. The ambassador gestured toward his armed escort. Seize the human, terminate the Vorthak contamination. What happened next became legendary throughout the sector. Instead of the expected battle, something unprecedented occurred. The Carthon soldiers hesitated, not from fear, but from confusion. They'd been programmed to fight monsters, not a family defending each other. Thane stepped forward, his massive form radiating controlled power. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute conviction. Fletcher saved cubs when own species would not, fed hungry, protected weak, showed path beyond endless war. His head tentacles weaved complex patterns of respect and determination. You threaten pack leader. This cannot stand. The other Vorthak warriors joined Thane, creating an impenetrable wall of obsidian scales and razor claws. But their stance wasn't aggressive, it was protective. They weren't preparing to attack, they were preparing to die for someone they'd chosen to follow. Spike and Dot moved to Fletcher's sides, their purring creating harmonics that resonated through the station's hull. The sound seemed to calm everyone present, even the Carthon soldiers who'd never heard anything like it. "Computer, are you getting this?" I whispered to myself. The standoff stretched for eternal seconds. Then Fletcher did what he did best. He walked straight toward the most dangerous person in the room. "Ambassador Krell, you're absolutely right about one thing. I did change them." Fletcher stopped just outside striking range of Krell's enhanced reflexes. "I showed them they could be more than weapons, more than the roles others assigned them." He gestured to his pack. "Look at them. Really look. They're not weak. They're not corrupted. They're evolved. They've moved beyond simple survival into something greater." "Sentimentality," Krell snarled. "The strong dominate the weak. This is universal law." "No," Fletcher said quietly. "The smart protect what matters. The wise build instead of destroying. The strong lift others up instead of crushing them down." Krell raised his weapon, but before he could fire, something unexpected happened. His own soldiers lowered their arms. One by one, they stepped away from their commanding officer. "Sir," the lead soldier said, "perhaps we should reconsider our approach. The revolution that followed wasn't fought with plasma rifles or orbital bombardments. It was won through example." Fletcher's pack became the template for a new kind of cooperation that spread from system to system, species to species. But that's not where this story ends. 2 years later, I received an urgent transmission from the Outer Rim territories. Fletcher had gone missing during a routine diplomatic mission to the Andromedax Nebula. His pack was requesting immediate assistance from anyone willing to help search for their missing leader. When I arrived at the coordinates, I found something that defied every prediction model in my database. Fletcher wasn't missing. He was building something impossible, a multi-species colony where natural enemies work together as equals. "Sorry about the deception," Fletcher said as I materialized on the planetary surface. "But some projects require a little privacy during the development phase." Around us, Vorthak cubs played with human children while their parents collaborated on construction projects that would have been unimaginable just years earlier. The sight was so absurd, so completely contrary to established biological imperatives, that my processors struggled to categorize it. "You realize this violates approximately 17 different evolutionary theories?" I pointed out. Fletcher grinned, that same expression of confident insanity I'd come to know so well. "Yeah, well, evolution's just another word for learning to do things better." Spike approached, now fully grown but still carrying that familiar purr whenever Fletcher was nearby. He was followed by 3 small figures, clearly his offspring, who regarded Fletcher with the same devotion their father had shown as a cub. "Looks like the next generation's already made their choice," Fletcher observed. And that's how one human with a sandwich didn't just change the political landscape of the Outer Rim. He rewrote the fundamental rules of what was possible when different species decided to build something together, instead of tearing each other apart. Some call it evolution, others call it revolution. Fletcher just calls it Tuesday, and gets back to work building tomorrow.